The smell of overpriced candles and fake smiles hit me the second I walked into our new townhouse. Lena had transformed our living room into something that looked like Martha Stewart's fever dream, all white furniture, gold accents, and flowers that probably cost more than my truck payment. "Nick, honey, can you grab more ice from the garage?" Lena's voice had that sweet poison tone she used when she wanted something. She was wearing a black dress that hugged every curve, her blonde hair perfectly styled, red lipstick that screamed, "Look at me." 3 months ago, that look would have made my heart race. Tonight, it just made me tired. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I'm Nick Doyle, 34 years old, and I fix cars for a living. Not glamorous, but honest work. My hands are permanently stained with grease, my back aches from bending over engines all day, and I smell like motor oil more often than cologne. Lena used to say she loved that about me, that I was real compared to the finance bros and lawyers she dealt with in her PR job. Used to. "Sure thing, sweetheart," I said, forcing a smile. The garage was my sanctuary, filled with tools, spare parts, and the comfortable chaos of actual work. I grabbed 2 bags of ice and headed back to face the music. The party was in full swing. Lena's work friends clustered around the kitchen island, their voices pitched at that specific frequency of fake excitement. I recognized most of them: Vanessa, Lena's best friend and professional gossip distributor; Brady, some marketing guy who always wore shirts that cost more than my weekly grocery budget; and a handful of other people whose names I'd forgotten and whose opinions mattered even less. But there was one face I recognized that made my stomach drop. Miles Carter stood by the fireplace, holding a glass of wine like he owned the place. Tall, perfectly groomed, wearing a suit that probably cost more than I made in a month. He had that smug smile that rich guys perfect in prep school, the one that says, "I always get what I want, and what I want is whatever you have." Miles was Lena's ex-boyfriend. They'd dated for 2 years before she met me, and according to her, it had been amicable when they broke up. He was a financial advisor downtown, drove a BMW that he treated like a religious artifact, and had the kind of confidence that comes from never having to fix your own problems. I watched Lena glide over to him, her face lighting up in a way it hadn't for me in months. They hugged, a little too long, a little too close, and I felt something cold settle in my chest. "Nick!" Carlos appeared at my elbow, saving me from staring. Carlos Martinez was my business partner and the closest thing I had to a brother. Short, stocky, with calloused hands and a laugh that could fill a room. "Man, this party is fancy. I'm afraid to touch anything." "Tell me about it," I muttered, watching Lena throw her head back at something Miles said. "When did she invite him?" Carlos followed my gaze. "Ah, shit. The ex, right? Dude looks like he irons his underwear. Probably pays someone else to do it." We stood there for a moment, 2 guys in jeans and button-downs, surrounded by people who spent more on their shoes than we made in a week. I'd never felt the class difference more acutely than I did right then. "Mr. Doyle!" a voice chirped behind us. I turned to see Mrs. Radcliffe, our 70-something neighbor, approaching with a plate of cookies. She was a tiny woman with steel-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. "Lovely party. Your wife certainly knows how to entertain." "She does indeed," I said, accepting a cookie. Mrs. Radcliffe had lived on our street for 40 years and knew everyone's business better than they did. She was also surprisingly tech-savvy for someone her age, with security cameras covering every angle of her property and a social media presence that would make teenagers jealous. "That young man by the fireplace," she continued, her voice casual but her eyes sharp. "Isn't he the one I've seen at the coffee shop with your wife? The one with the fancy car?" My blood went cold. "What coffee shop?" "The little place on Maple Street. I've seen them there twice in the past month. Very cozy conversations. She patted my arm gently. Just thought you should know, dear. Before I could respond, Lena's laugh rang out across the room. I looked over to see her and Miles stepping out onto the back patio, wine glasses in hand. The patio light cast them in a golden glow, and even from across the room, I could see the way she was looking at him. I need some air, I told Carlos. Nick, man, don't do anything stupid. But I was already moving, weaving through the crowd of people who barely acknowledged my existence. I slipped out the side door that led to the garden, staying in the shadows of the oak tree Lena had insisted we plant when we moved in. They were standing close, too close. Miles had his hand on the small of her back, and Lena was looking up at him with an expression I recognized, the same one she'd worn when we first started dating. Hungry. Alive. I've missed this, I heard her say, her voice soft and intimate. Me too, Miles replied. I know the timing is complicated, but that's when he kissed her. Not a friendly peck, not an accidental brush of lips. A real kiss, deep and passionate, the kind that says, I want you, and I'm going to have you. And she kissed him back. I stood there in the shadows for maybe 10 seconds, watching my wife kiss another man in our backyard, while our housewarming party continued inside. 10 seconds that felt like 10 hours, 10 years, 10 lifetimes of watching everything I thought I knew crumble into dust. Then I stepped into the light. Hey there, I said, my voice surprisingly calm. They jumped apart like teenagers caught by parents, Lena's lipstick smeared, Miles straightening his tie. Hope I'm not interrupting anything important. Lena's face went through several expressions at once: guilt, fear, defiance, and finally settling on fake innocence. Nick, we were just talking about what? Market trends? The weather? The best techniques for tongue wrestling? I walked closer, and both of them took a step back. Actually, don't answer that. Miles, good to see you again, buddy. I stuck out my hand, and Miles, confused and probably panicked, shook it automatically. I gripped his hand tight, leaning in close enough to smell his expensive cologne. She's all yours, I whispered, just loud enough for Lena to hear. Enjoy. Then I turned and walked back toward the house, leaving them standing there with their mouths open. I could hear Lena calling my name, but I didn't turn around. I walked through the party, past the concerned faces of Carlos and Mrs. Radcliffe, past the curious stares of people who'd probably be gossiping about this for weeks. I grabbed my truck keys from the kitchen counter and headed for the front door. Nick, wait! Lena caught up with me in the driveway, her heels clicking on the concrete. It's not what you think. I stopped at my truck and turned to look at her. She was beautiful. I'd give her that. Even flushed and panicked, even with her lipstick smeared and guilt written all over her face, she was stunning, which made what came next easier, somehow. Actually, it's exactly what I think, I said. And you know what? I'm okay with it. Her face crumpled in confusion. What? I said I'd be cool, right? Well, I'm about to be ice cold. I got in the truck and rolled down the window. Enjoy the rest of your party, Lena. I've got some things to take care of. I drove away, leaving her standing in the driveway in her perfect black dress, watching her perfect life start to crack at the edges. In my rearview mirror, I could see guests starting to gather at the windows, drawn by the drama like moths to a flame. 3 blocks away, I pulled into an empty parking lot and sat there for a minute, hands shaking on the steering wheel. Then I picked up an empty beer bottle from the floor of my truck and threw it as hard as I could against a dumpster. It exploded in a shower of brown glass, and I felt something inside my chest explode with it. My phone started buzzing. Text after text, call after call. Lena, Vanessa, Carlos, even my sister Jenna, who lived 2 states away but somehow already knew something was wrong. The gossip network in our town moved faster than the internet. I turned off the phone and drove to the one place where I could think clearly: my garage. The garage at night was my church, my therapy, my war room. I'd bought the building 5 years ago with money I'd saved working double shifts at other people's shops, and every square inch of it was mine. The smell of motor oil and metal, the familiar weight of tools in my hands, the honest simplicity of fixing things that were broken. It was the only place in the world where everything made sense. I flipped on the lights and looked around at my kingdom. 3 bays, each with a car in various stages of repair. A 1967 Mustang that I was restoring in my spare time. Walls lined with tools, parts, and certificates from every automotive training course I'd ever taken. This was real. This was honest. This was mine. My phone had been buzzing non-stop since I'd turned it back on. 17 missed calls from Lena, 12 from various party guests, and 1 from Carlos that just said, "Dude, call me." But it was the text messages that really painted the picture. Lena: "Nick, please come home. We need to talk." Lena: "It's not what you think. Miles and I are just friends." Lena: "You're embarrassing me. People are asking questions." Lena: "Fine, be childish. I'll handle this myself." Vanessa: "OMG, what happened?" Lena won't tell me anything, but everyone's talking. My sister Jenna: "Mom called. Said Mrs. Henderson from your street posted something on Facebook about drama at your party. What's going on?" That last one made me laugh despite everything. Mrs. Henderson was Mrs. Radcliffe's best friend and biggest rival in the neighborhood gossip game. If she was posting about it on Facebook, the whole town would know by morning. I was reading through the messages when I heard a car pull up outside. Carlos's beat-up Honda, recognizable by the distinctive rattle of a muffler that needed replacing. He knocked once and let himself in, carrying a 6-pack of beer and wearing the expression of a man preparing for either a funeral or a fight. "All right," he said, setting the beer on my workbench. "Talk to me. What happened after you left?" I cracked open a beer and told him everything. The kiss, the conversation with Mrs. Radcliffe about the coffee shop meetings, the way Lena had looked at Miles like he was water and she'd been wandering in the desert for years. Carlos listened without interrupting, occasionally shaking his head or muttering something in Spanish under his breath. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "So what's the plan?" he asked finally. "What do you mean?" "Come on, Nick. I've known you for 8 years. You don't just walk away from fights. You sure as hell don't walk away from something like this." "So what's the plan?" I took a long pull from my beer and looked around the garage. "I'm going to do what I do best. I'm going to fix something that's broken." "Your marriage?" "No. That's beyond repair. I'm going to fix the problem of people thinking they can walk all over Nick Doyle without consequences." Carlos grinned, and I saw something dangerous flash in his eyes. "Now you're talking. What do you need?" Over the next 2 hours we planned, not like criminals or psychopaths, but like mechanics approaching a particularly complex engine problem. We identified the components, analyzed the systems, and figured out exactly where to apply pressure to get the desired result. The beautiful thing about modern life is how much of it happens online, how much evidence people leave behind without thinking about it. Lena had left her iPad at home, still logged into all her accounts. Her phone backed up to our shared iCloud account. She'd been sloppy, overconfident, probably never imagining that her grease monkey husband would be smart enough to piece together her digital trail. But I hadn't spent 5 years building a business without learning a few things about technology. Modern cars are basically computers on wheels, and I'd had to learn diagnostic software, GPS systems, and electronic control modules just to do my job. Compared to troubleshooting a transmission control module, hacking my own wife's social media accounts was child's play. By midnight, I had a timeline. Coffee shop meetings going back 3 months. Text messages between Lena and Miles that started friendly and gradually became more intimate. Photos from a weekend girls' trip that Vanessa had posted, showing Lena at a restaurant I recognized. The same restaurant where Miles had checked in on Facebook that same night. Jesus, Carlos whistled, looking over my shoulder at the evidence. She's been playing the long game. 3 months, I said, staring at the screen. 3 months of lying to my face, sleeping in my bed, spending my money, and planning her exit strategy. So what's first? I looked at the photos of Miles's BMW that I'd screenshotted from his Instagram. Pristine, detailed, obsessively maintained. He posted about that car like other people posted about their children. First, I said, we're going to teach Mr. Carter about the fragility of beautiful things. The next morning, I called in sick to work, first time in 2 years, and drove to Miles's downtown condo building. High-rise glass and steel, valet parking, the kind of place where they probably charged extra for breathing the air. I parked across the street and waited. Miles emerged at exactly 8:15 a.m., wearing another perfect suit, carrying a leather briefcase that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. He handed his keys to the valet with the casual arrogance of someone who'd never had to park his own car, then walked toward the business district. I gave him a 10-minute head start, then got to work. The beautiful thing about expensive cars is that they're designed to be perfect, which makes them incredibly vulnerable to small imperfections. A handful of sand in the gas tank. Sugar was a myth, but sand would destroy an engine beautifully. A small nail placed strategically behind the rear tire, so it would puncture when he backed out. Nothing that would cause an accident, nothing that would hurt anyone, just expensive, inconvenient damage to the thing he loved most. But the masterpiece was what I did to his air intake system. I'd brought a large dead fish, a carp I'd bought from the bait shop, and managed to wedge it deep into the ventilation system. It would take days for the smell to become noticeable, weeks for it to become unbearable, and even longer for any mechanic to find the source. By the time I was done, Miles Carter was going to have a very bad month. I was walking back to my truck when my phone buzzed with a call from Mrs. Radcliffe. Mr. Doyle? I hope you don't mind me calling, but I thought you should know. Your wife had a visitor this morning. That young man from last night. He was there for about an hour. I closed my eyes and felt that cold feeling in my chest spread a little wider. Thank you, Mrs. Radcliffe. I appreciate you letting me know. Of course, dear. Oh, and Mr. Doyle? If you need any evidence of these visits, my security cameras have excellent resolution. Just thought you might want to know. God bless Mrs. Radcliffe. I spent the rest of the morning at a coffee shop across from Miles's building, waiting and watching. Sure enough, around noon, I saw him emerge from the elevator, his perfect composure cracking slightly as he argued with someone on his phone. The valet brought his car around, and I watched Miles's face go through a series of expressions as he noticed the flat tire. Then he opened the door and got hit with the first wave of what would soon become an overwhelming fish smell. I finished my coffee, left a generous tip, and drove home to face my wife. Lena was waiting for me when I walked through the front door, sitting on our white couch like she was posing for a magazine spread. She'd changed out of the black dress into jeans and a sweater, her casual but still gorgeous look, and her blonde hair was pulled back in a ponytail that made her look younger and more innocent. "We need to talk," she said, her voice carefully controlled. "Do we?" I walked to the kitchen and grabbed a beer from the refrigerator, taking my time. "I thought you handled everything yourself. That's what your text said." "Don't be like this, Nick. You're being childish." I leaned against the kitchen counter and looked at her. Really looked at her. 5 years of marriage, 2 years of dating before that, 7 years of my life invested in this woman, this relationship, this house, this life we'd built together. 7 years, and I was just now seeing her clearly. "Tell me about the coffee shop," I said. Her face went pale. "What coffee shop?" "The one on Maple Street, where you and Miles have been meeting for the past 3 months. She was quiet for a long moment, and I could almost see the calculations running behind her eyes. Deny everything? Admit to some but not all? Flip the script and make me the bad guy? It's not what you think, she said finally, going with option one. Lena, I saw you kiss him. In our backyard, at our housewarming party, in front of our friends. I took a sip of beer, keeping my voice level. What exactly do you think I think? It was a mistake. We had too much wine and 3 months of coffee shop meetings was a mistake? All those text messages were a mistake? That weekend in Chicago when you told me you were visiting your sister, but you were actually at the Palmer house with Miles. Was that a mistake too? Now she looked genuinely shocked. How did you? You left your iPad here, sweetheart. Logged into everything. Your location services, your photo backup, your text messages. Did you know that when you take a photo with GPS enabled, it records the exact location? The Palmer house has a very distinctive view from the 19th floor. Lena stood up, and for the first time since I'd known her, she looked genuinely rattled. You went through my private messages? That's a violation of my privacy. I almost laughed. Your privacy? You've been cheating on me for 3 months, and you're worried about privacy? I haven't been cheating. Miles and I are just friends. Friends who kiss, friends who spend weekends in hotel rooms, friends who text each other things like, I can't stop thinking about last night and I wish Nick wasn't in the picture. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. For once in her life, Lena was speechless. Here's what's going to happen, I continued, finishing my beer and setting the bottle on the counter. You're going to pack a bag and stay somewhere else for a while. We're going to figure out how to divide our assets, sell this house, and end this marriage like adults. Or you can keep lying to me, and I can start sharing some of these screenshots with your boss, your friends, and your family. You wouldn't. Try me. We stared at each other across the kitchen, and I saw the moment when she realized I wasn't bluffing. The sweet, apologetic mask slipped, and underneath was something harder, colder, more calculating. Fine, she said. But you're making a huge mistake, Nick. Miles can give me things you never could. Like what? A BMW? A downtown condo? Stock options? Like a future, like ambition, like someone who wants more out of life than fixing cars and drinking beer in a garage. That stung, and she knew it. But I'd been expecting it. When people show you who they really are, believe them the first time. You're right, I said. Miles can give you all of those things, and you know what I can give you? What? A really expensive divorce. She packed a bag and left that afternoon, and I spent the evening cleaning up the remnants of the party. Vanessa called 3 times, fishing for information. My sister Jenna called to check on me. Carlos stopped by with pizza and more beer, and we sat in the garage talking about everything except my marriage. But it was Mrs. Radcliffe who provided the most interesting information. I hope you don't mind, she said, appearing at my door around 9 p.m. with a plate of cookies and a manila envelope. But I thought you might want these. Inside the envelope were printouts of security camera footage, time-stamped and dated, Miles's BMW in my driveway, Miles and Lena embracing in full view of the street, Miles leaving the house at various times over the past month, always when my truck wasn't in the driveway. How long have you been documenting this? I asked. About 6 weeks. I've seen enough marriages end badly in this neighborhood to recognize the signs. She patted my arm gently. I'm sorry, dear, but it's better to know the truth. Yes, it is. That young man's car broke down this afternoon, she added casually. Right in front of the building downtown. Quite a scene from what I heard. Something about a terrible smell. I tried to look surprised. Really? And I heard through the grapevine that he's been having some other problems too. Flat tires, mysterious car trouble, almost like someone with mechanical expertise was sending him a message. Mrs. Radcliffe was sharper than I'd given her credit for. That's terrible, I said. I hope he gets it figured out. Oh, I'm sure he will, eventually. She smiled sweetly. Would you like me to keep monitoring the situation? For legal purposes, of course? That would be very helpful, Mrs. Radcliffe. Thank you. After she left, I sat in my living room, our living room, soon to be my former living room, and looked around at the life Lena and I had built together. The expensive furniture, the carefully chosen artwork, the photos of happier times when I'd actually believed we wanted the same things. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Miles. We need to talk." I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, "No, we don't. You damaged my car. I know it was you. Prove it. Stay away from Lena. She's made her choice." I almost deleted the conversation, then had a better idea. I took a screenshot and saved it to the growing folder of evidence I was building. Then I typed back, "You're right. She chose the guy who can't even change his own oil. Good luck with that." He didn't respond, but I hadn't expected him to. Miles Carter was used to getting his way through money and intimidation. He wasn't equipped to deal with someone who had nothing left to lose and a very specific set of skills. But I was just getting started. The next 2 weeks fell into a strange routine. I went to work, came home to an empty house, and spent my evenings planning the systematic destruction of Miles Carter's comfortable life. Not illegal destruction. I wasn't stupid enough to do anything that would land me in jail. But there are a lot of perfectly legal ways to make someone's life complicated when you know what you're doing. Miles's car problems continued to escalate. The fish smell had become so overwhelming that he'd taken it to 3 different mechanics, none of whom could locate the source. His insurance company was getting suspicious about the frequency of his claims, and somehow his personal information had ended up on several mailing lists for things like bankruptcy attorneys, anger management classes, and erectile dysfunction treatments. Meanwhile, Lena had moved in with Vanessa temporarily, and the gossip network was working overtime. Mrs. Radcliffe kept me updated on the neighborhood chatter, which ranged from sympathy for me to speculation about what had really happened at the party. The general consensus seemed to be that Lena had traded up, and I was the poor schmuck left behind. That was about to change. "You look like hell," Carlos said, finding me under the hood of the Mustang on a Thursday afternoon. "When's the last time you slept?" "I sleep. I mean real sleep, not passing out in your garage chair at 3 a.m., surrounded by empty beer bottles and printouts of text messages." I straightened up and wiped my hands on a rag. Carlos was right. I probably did look like hell. I'd lost weight, hadn't been shaving regularly, and was living on a diet of coffee, beer, and whatever takeout food I remembered to order. "I'm fine." "No, you're not. You're obsessed. This thing with Miles and Lena, it's eating you alive. They destroyed my marriage, my life, everything I worked for. So destroy them back and move on. But this slow-burn revenge thing you've got going, it's not healthy, man." I looked at my best friend, my business partner, the guy who'd been watching me spiral for 2 weeks without saying anything until now. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting you end this. One big, public, devastating blow that settles the score once and for all. Then you file for divorce, sell the house, and start over somewhere else. I can't just leave. This is my business, my life. Your life was with Lena, and that's over. Your business is half mine, and it's portable. We can set up shop anywhere." Carlos leaned against the workbench and crossed his arms. "But first, we finish this properly." That evening, I got a call that changed everything. "Nick, it's Vanessa." Her voice was tight, nervous. "We need to talk." Vanessa had been Lena's best friend since college, her partner in crime, her enabler and co-conspirator in everything. If she was calling me, something big was happening. "What about?" "Not over the phone. Can you meet me at Murphy's Bar in an hour?" Murphy's was a dive bar on the edge of town, the kind of place where nobody cared about your problems and the beer was cheap. I found Vanessa in a corner booth, looking uncharacteristically subdued. She'd traded her usual designer clothes for jeans and a sweater, and she wasn't wearing the bright red lipstick that was practically her signature. "Thanks for coming," she said as I sat down. "I wasn't sure you would." "What's this about, Vanessa?" She stared at her drink for a moment, then looked up at me with something that might have been guilt. "Lena's pregnant." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. "What?" "She took a test yesterday. She's about 6 weeks along." I did the math quickly. 6 weeks ago, Lena and I were still sleeping together regularly, but she'd also been meeting with Miles. The timeline was ambiguous enough to create doubt, which was probably exactly what she wanted. "Is it mine?" I asked. "She says it is. She wants to reconcile, work things out, be a family." "And what do you think?" Vanessa was quiet for a long moment. "I think Lena is scared. Miles isn't responding to her calls. His car problems and whatever else has been happening to him. He thinks you're some kind of psycho stalker. He's talking about getting a restraining order, maybe moving to another city. So she's coming back to her backup plan." That's a shitty way to put it, but yeah, maybe. Vanessa finished her drink and signaled for another. "Look, Nick, I've been Lena's friend for 15 years. I love her like a sister, but what she did to you was wrong. The affair, the lying, the way she humiliated you at your own party, it was wrong." "Then why are you here?" "Because she's pregnant and scared, and because despite everything, I think you're a good guy who deserves to know the truth." "What truth?" Vanessa reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. "The truth about when this affair really started." She showed me a photo from her Instagram, dated 8 months ago. A group shot from some work event, with Lena and Miles standing very close together, his hand on her back, both of them looking at each other instead of the camera. 8 months? I said. "At least. Maybe longer." Vanessa swiped to another photo, this one from almost a year ago. I didn't think anything of it at the time. Miles was always around, always flirting with whoever was available. But looking back, she showed me more photos, a timeline of increasing intimacy hidden in plain sight. Lena and Miles at work events, at bars, at restaurants. Always in groups, always with plausible deniability, but always gravitating toward each other. "Jesus Christ," I whispered. "A year. She's been cheating on me for a year." "I'm sorry, Nick. I should have said something earlier, but I didn't want to believe it myself." I stared at the photos, feeling something cold and final settle in my chest. Not anger this time, but clarity. Perfect, crystalline clarity about what needed to happen next. "Vanessa, I need you to do something for me." "What?" "I need you to tell Lena that I want to meet with her and Miles, all 3 of us together. Tell her I'm ready to discuss reconciliation, maybe work something out." "Are you serious?" "Dead serious, but it has to be public. Somewhere with lots of people, lots of witnesses. Somewhere they'll feel safe and confident." Vanessa looked suspicious. "Nick, what are you planning?" "I'm planning to give them exactly what they deserve." The meeting was set for Saturday night at Skyline, the trendy rooftop bar downtown that was always packed with young professionals showing off their success. Lena's choice, of course. She wanted to be somewhere that made her feel important, somewhere that showcased the life she thought she deserved. I spent Friday night preparing. Not weapons or anything dramatic, just information. Printed photos, text message screenshots, financial records, and a few other surprises I'd been saving for the right moment. Everything organized in a manila folder, everything documented and verified. Carlos tried one more time to talk me out of it. "You sure about this, man? Once you pull this trigger, there's no going back." "There's already no going back. She made sure of that when she decided to cheat on me for a year and then try to pass off her boyfriend's baby as mine." "You don't know for sure it's his." "DNA test will tell us that, but either way, I'm done being the fool in this story." Saturday evening, I put on my best shirt, shaved carefully, and drove downtown feeling calmer than I had in weeks. The rage was still there, but it was cold now, controlled, focused into something sharp and precise. Skyline was everything I expected. Glass walls, expensive cocktails, and a crowd of people who looked like they'd stepped out of a magazine. I found Lena and Miles at a corner table, both dressed like they were going to a job interview. Lena wore a blue dress that flattered her figure, and Miles had on another perfect suit. They looked like the successful, beautiful couple they thought they were. "Nick," Lena stood up and hugged me, a performance for the people around us. "Thank you for coming. I know this is difficult." "Not as difficult as you might think," I said, sitting down across from them. "Miles, good to see you again. How's the car situation?" Miles's jaw tightened. "Fine, just some mechanical issues. Weird how those things happen. Must be frustrating for someone who's used to everything running smoothly." A waiter appeared, and I ordered a beer while Lena and Miles nursed what looked like their first drinks of the evening. They were nervous, trying to maintain control of a situation they didn't understand. "So," Lena said, her voice bright and artificial, "Vanessa said you wanted to talk about working things out." "I do. I think it's important that we're all honest with each other about what's been happening. Full transparency, you know?" "Of course," Miles said. "We're all adults here." "Great. Let's start with this." I pulled out my phone and opened the folder of screenshots I'd prepared. "Lena, when exactly did your relationship with Miles become physical?" Her face went pale. "Nick, I don't think... Because according to your text messages, it was at least 8 months ago. There's a particularly interesting conversation from last December where you're discussing what to get me for Christmas while simultaneously planning a weekend getaway with Miles." I turned the phone so they could see the screen and watched both of their faces crumble. Around us, other patrons were starting to notice the tension at our table. "That's private," Lena hissed. "You had no right." "I had every right. You're my wife, or were, until you decided to audition for a replacement." I swiped to another screenshot. "Miles, did you know that Lena was telling me she loved me the same week she was telling you that I was just a temporary situation?" Miles looked at Lena with something that might have been hurt. "You said you were going to leave him months ago." "I was. I am. The timing was just complicated," I suggested. "Like when you found out you were pregnant and suddenly needed to figure out which one of us was more likely to stick around." The table went dead silent. Other conversations around us continued, but I could feel people starting to stare. "How did you..." Lena began. "Vanessa told me. Good friend, by the way. Very concerned about your well-being." I pulled out the manila folder and set it on the table. "She also provided some interesting photographic evidence about the timeline of your relationship." I opened the folder and spread out the printed photos Vanessa had sent me, along with a few others I'd found on social media. A year's worth of evidence, laid out like a case file. "Jesus," Miles muttered, looking at the photos. "Lena, you told me this thing with your husband was over months ago." "It was. Emotionally it was over, but physically you were still sleeping with both of us." I kept my voice conversational, but loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "Right up until last week, actually. Kind of makes the paternity question interesting, doesn't it?" Lena's face was bright red now, and Miles looked like he wanted to disappear into his chair. Around us, conversations had quieted as people tuned in to the drama at our table. "You're embarrassing yourself," Lena said through gritted teeth. "Am I? Because I think I'm just telling the truth. Something you might want to try sometime." I pulled out another sheet of paper. "For instance, Miles, did you know that Lena has been using your credit card to buy things for our house? Furniture, decorations, even groceries. Apparently she's been planning to leave me for months, but she figured she might as well redecorate first." Miles turned to stare at Lena. "What credit card?" "The one you gave me for emergencies." "For emergencies, not for buying furniture for another man's house." Their voices were rising now, and I could see phones coming out at nearby tables. In the age of social media, public drama was entertainment, and this was turning into quite a show. Here's my favorite part, I continued, pulling out the last document in my folder. Lena, remember that weekend in Chicago when you told me you were visiting your sister? The weekend you were actually at the Palmer house with Miles? Nick, stop. Your sister called me that weekend. She was worried because you weren't answering your phone. Turns out she was expecting you for Sunday brunch, but you never showed up. I looked at Miles. How was brunch at the Palmer house, by the way? The room service must have been excellent. Miles stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. I'm not doing this. This is insane. Sit down, Miles. We're just getting to the good part. No, we're done here. Lena, you figure out your own mess. I'm not dealing with this psycho husband of yours anymore. He started to walk away, but I raised my voice just enough to carry across the rooftop. Miles, don't you want to know about the baby? He stopped, and every conversation around us died completely. The entire rooftop bar was now watching our table like it was the season finale of their favorite TV show. What about it? He said, not turning around. Well, based on the timeline, there's about a 50-50 chance it's yours. Lena's been very active these past few months. Miles turned around slowly, his face white. What? Lena was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks. Nick, please stop. You're ruining everything. I'm not ruining anything, sweetheart. I'm just revealing what was already ruined. I stood up and looked around at our audience. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to meet my wife, Lena Doyle, and her boyfriend, Miles Carter. They've been having an affair for over a year, and now she's pregnant and trying to figure out which one of us is the father. The rooftop erupted in whispers and gasps. Phones were definitely recording now, and I could see people typing furiously on their devices. By tomorrow morning, this would be all over social media. You're insane, Miles said, but his voice lacked conviction. Am I, or am I just tired of being lied to? I picked up my beer and took a long drink. Here's what's going to happen. Lena's going to file for divorce, we're going to sell the house, and she's going to get a paternity test. If the baby's mine, I'll pay child support. If it's yours, Miles, congratulations. You're going to be a daddy. And if I don't want to be a father, Miles asked, then you should have thought of that before you started sleeping with a married woman. I finished my beer and left a 20 on the table. Thanks for the drinks, folks. This has been illuminating. As I walked toward the exit, I could hear Lena calling my name, but I didn't turn around. Behind me, the rooftop was buzzing with excited conversation, phones were ringing, and what was left of my marriage was dying in front of an audience of strangers. It was exactly what I'd wanted. 3 weeks later, I was in my garage working on the Mustang when Carlos brought me the envelope. Official-looking, from a medical laboratory, addressed to both me and Lena. The paternity test results we'd both agreed to after that night at Skyline. You sure you want to open this? Carlos asked. I'm sure. I tore open the envelope and read the results twice, just to be certain. Then I handed the paper to Carlos and watched his eyebrows climb toward his hairline. Well, shit, he said. The baby wasn't mine. I should have felt relieved, but mostly I just felt tired. Tired of the drama, tired of the anger, tired of carrying around the weight of betrayal and disappointment. The paternity test was just the final punctuation mark on a story that had already ended. My phone rang. Lena. Nick? Did you get the results? I got them. We need to talk. No, we don't. We need to finish the divorce paperwork and move on with our lives. It's not that simple. Miles doesn't want anything to do with the baby. He says I trapped him, that I lied about being on birth control. He's talking about moving to Seattle, starting over. I almost laughed. So let me guess. You want to reconcile? Work things out? Pretend this whole thing never happened? We could try counseling. Lena, stop. Just stop. I sat down on my workbench and looked around the garage, my sanctuary, the one place in the world that still made sense. You made your choice. Multiple choices, actually, over the course of a year. You chose to cheat. You chose to lie. You chose to humiliate me in front of our friends and neighbors. You chose Miles over me, repeatedly, until he didn't want you anymore. I made mistakes. You made decisions, and now you get to live with the consequences. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When she spoke again, her voice was small and broken. I'm scared, Nick. I don't know how to do this alone. For just a moment, I felt a flicker of the old sympathy, the old protective instinct that had made me fall in love with her in the first place. But then I remembered the photos, the text messages, the way she'd looked at Miles in our backyard while our friends drank our wine and celebrated our new house. You should have thought of that before you decided I wasn't good enough for you, I said. Good luck, Lena. I hope you figure it out. I hung up and turned off my phone. 2 months later, the divorce was final. Lena got half the value of the house after we sold it, plus alimony for 2 years. I got my tools, my truck, my business, and my freedom. It seemed like a fair trade. Miles had indeed moved to Seattle, leaving no forwarding address and blocking Lena on all social media platforms. The gossip network reported that he'd taken a job with a tech company and was dating a 25-year-old yoga instructor. Some people never learn. I used my half of the house money to buy a bigger garage across town in a neighborhood where nobody knew my story and nobody cared about my past. Carlos and I moved the business, picked up new clients, and slowly rebuilt something that felt like a normal life. Mrs. Radcliffe stopped by on my last day in the old neighborhood, bringing cookies and a manila envelope full of security camera footage. For your records, she said with a wink, in case you ever need to remember why you made the right choice. Thank you, Mrs. Radcliffe, for everything. Oh, don't mention it, dear. It was quite entertaining, actually, better than cable television. She hugged me goodbye, and I realized I was going to miss her more than anyone else from that chapter of my life. 6 months after the divorce, I ran into Vanessa at a coffee shop. She looked tired, older somehow, and she was alone. Nick, how are you doing? Good. Really good, actually. How's Lena? Vanessa's expression darkened. Not great. The baby's due next month, and she's struggling. Financially, emotionally. She's living with her parents, working part-time at a marketing firm that pays about half what her old job did. I'm sorry to hear that. Are you? Really? I thought about it for a moment. Yeah, I am. I don't hate her, Vanessa. I'm not glad she's suffering. I just don't love her anymore. She asks about you sometimes, wonders how you're doing, whether you're seeing anyone. And what do you tell her? I tell her that you're doing fine, and that she made her choice. We talked for a few more minutes about neutral topics, then went our separate ways. As I walked back to my truck, I realized that I really was fine. Better than fine, actually. For the first time in years, I was exactly where I wanted to be, doing exactly what I wanted to do, with no one to answer to but myself. That evening, I was working late in the garage when Carlos found me under the hood of a 1969 Camaro that a collector had brought in for restoration. You know what I realized today? He said, handing me a beer. What's that? You never actually got revenge on them. I straightened up and wiped my hands on a rag. What do you mean? I mean, you embarrassed them in public, you exposed their lies, you made their lives complicated for a while. But that's not really revenge. That's just consequences. What's the difference? Revenge would have been destroying them completely, ruining their careers, their reputations, their futures, making sure they never recovered from what they did to you. I took a sip of beer and thought about it. You're right. I could have done a lot more damage. So, why didn't you? I looked around the garage, at the cars in various stages of repair, at the tools that had belonged to my father and his father before him, at the business I'd built with my own hands and my own sweat. Because this is better, I said finally. They destroyed themselves. Miles ran away from his responsibilities and lost the woman he claimed to love. Lena lost her husband, her home, her financial security, and her self-respect. They're both miserable, and they did it to themselves. And you? I'm free. I'm successful. I'm happy. That's not revenge. That's victory. Carlos grinned and clinked his beer bottle against mine. To victory, then. To victory. We drank our beers and went back to work on the Camaro. Outside, the sun was setting over the city, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new problems to solve, new engines to rebuild. But tonight, in my garage, surrounded by the honest smell of motor oil and the comfortable weight of tools in my hands, I was exactly where I belonged. Lena had been right about one thing. Miles could give her things I never could. A BMW, a downtown condo, stock options, and the illusion of a more sophisticated life. But I could give her something he couldn't, the satisfaction of knowing that when she threw away something real for something shiny and fake, she got exactly what she deserved. Nothing.